The planet Vorta. 7 lay in the cold grip of an eternal twilight, its sky a swirling mass of violet and black, where twin moons cast eerie reflections over the jagged mountains and endless dunes of crimson sand. It was a world of death, a place where the unprepared perish within days, whether from the merciless storms, the razor-clawed beasts that roamed the night, or the suffocating silence that could drive even the strongest minds to madness. Yet, despite its inhospitable nature, the rulers of the Tri-Kingdom of Zelenar had come, not for conquest, not for treasure, but for a man, a human, aboard the warship Dread Harbinger. King Vorgith the Unyielding stood, with his 4 crimson eyes fixed on the planet below. His body, forged from muscle and plated with ceremonial armor, radiated raw power. He was the mightiest of the 3 Zelenar kings, a warrior who had broken 1,000 foes with his own hands. And yet, here he was, chasing a ghost. "It is an insult," Vorgith growled, his voice like grinding stone. "A single human, living on a world where our finest warriors have perished. It is a stain on our honor." Beside him, Xiphos the Shadowborn let out a low chuckle, his obsidian cloak shifting as if woven from living darkness. Unlike Vorgith, Xiphos was lean, his presence more unsettling than imposing. His twin fangs gleamed under the pale glow of the ship's control panel. Perhaps we should admire his resilience. To have survived this long is remarkable. Admiration is for the weak. The 3rd king, Kael'rit the Stormbringer, grinned, his golden armor crackling with arcs of raw energy. His mere presence made the air hum with power. "Let's end this farce quickly. I grow bored." Vorgith turned to the Zelenar Deathstalkers, the elite hunters of the Tri-Kingdom. These creatures, bred for nothing but slaughter, stood at attention. Their 6-legged, sinewy forms coiled like springs, their elongated heads crowned with razor-edged frills that twitched at every sound. Their eyes burned with hunger, their bladed limbs ready to carve through flesh and bone. "You have your orders," Vorgith said. "Find him. Drag him before us, dead or alive." Without a word, the Deathstalkers leaped into the abyss, vanishing into the vast expanse of Vorta 7. The hunt had begun. Deep within the canyons of Vorta 7, the hermit sat motionless by a dwindling fire. The wind howled through the ravines, carrying with it the whispers of the dead. The hermit barely noticed. His eyes, sharp as a blade's edge, remained fixed on the horizon. He had felt the presence of the warship long before it arrived. He had sensed their hunters the moment they stepped onto the surface. They came for him. Again, he exhaled, his breath forming a faint mist in the cold air. The Tri-Kingdom had hunted him for years, though he had long lost count of how many times. They had sent warriors, assassins, and beasts bred for killing. They had scoured worlds, burned forests, and poisoned rivers just to draw him out. And yet, here he remained. They never understood. They never learned. Rising from his seat, the hermit reached for his weapon, a simple blade, unadorned, its surface worn from years of use. A blade that cleaved through creatures of nightmare, through the armor of titans, through the hearts of kings. He had no need for grand speeches or displays of power. His actions would speak for him. The wind shifted. The Deathstalkers were near. He vanished into the shadows, ready to teach them their final lesson. The Deathstalkers moved as one, silent as a void, their eyes scanning for the slightest movement. They had tracked the greatest prey in the galaxy, void serpents, war behemoths, the dreaded Nightborn of the Andar system. None had ever evaded them. None had ever survived them. And yet, there was something wrong about this hunt. The first hunter, a veteran of 100 battles, paused. The cavern was too silent, the air too still. It raised a claw, signaling the others to halt. A whisper. The hunter turned sharply, its wrist blade sliding free. The whisper came again, softer this time, like the wind through bones. Nothing. Then darkness moved. A flash of steel. A cry of agony. The first hunter collapsed, black blood pooling beneath it. The others reacted instantly, forming a tight formation. Their frills twitched, scanning for movement. But the shadows were shifting, closing in. The whisper came again, closer this time. Another flash. Another scream. The formation broke. Panic set in. One by one, they fell, their bodies crumpling to the ground before they could even register their own deaths. The last hunter, gasping, barely able to comprehend what had happened, looked up to see him. The hermit stepped from the darkness, his blade dripping with their kin's blood. His eyes, cold and unyielding, met the hunter's. No words were spoken. The blade fell. The hunt was over. And now the kings would come themselves. The remains of the Zelenar Death Stalkers lay scattered across the canyon floor, their lifeless bodies a testament to the futility of their mission. The crimson sands of Vorta. 7 drank their black blood, as if the planet itself sought to erase their presence. The air still carried the echoes of their final moments, the brief, sharp cries of hunters who had become prey. From the towering cliffs above, the hermit observed the aftermath of his work. His expression remained unchanged, unreadable. He had long since stopped counting the bodies left in his wake. The Tri-Kingdom of Zelenar would not relent. Their pride would not allow it. Now that their hunters had failed, the kings themselves would come. He sighed. It always ends the same way. He retrieved his blade from the last fallen hunter, wiping the dark ichor onto his tattered cloak. Then, with the ease of a shadow slipping through moonlight, he vanished into the labyrinthine caverns of Vorta 7, his presence blending into the whispers of the wind. Aboard the warship Dread Harbinger, the 3 kings stood in stunned silence. Before them, the last footage from their fallen hunters played on a holographic display. It was brief, only flickering glimpses of something moving too fast, blurred edges of figure cloaked in darkness, the faint glint of a blade, the rapid termination of every Death Stalker in under 2 minutes. Then silence. The footage ended. Vorgith the Unyielding clenched his fists. His 4 crimson eyes burned with fury, his massive form trembling with restrained rage. Unacceptable, he snarled. A single human did this? Kael'rith the Stormbringer folded his arms, his golden armor crackling with static. I am beginning to think this is no ordinary human. Xiphos the Shadowborn studied the darkened screen, his forked tongue flickering. If the stories are true, then we should tread carefully. Vorgith's glare snapped to him. You suggest we fear him? Xiphos' eyes glowed beneath his obsidian hood. I suggest we respect what we do not yet understand. A silence fell between them. The implications were disturbing. Humans were weak. Their kind had been conquered across countless worlds, their empires shattered beneath the might of the Zelenar. And yet, this one human had survived on a planet where even their elite warriors had perished. He had not merely survived. He had won. Vorgith's rage could not allow this insult to stand. He turned to the command console, issuing a command in the guttural language of his kind. Prepare the landing parties. We end this ourselves. The winds of Vorta 7 screamed as the warship descended upon the canyon. The kings of Zelenar emerged from the flames of their landing craft, their war cloaks billowing behind them. Behind them, squads of heavily armed Zelenar enforcers fanned out, their weapons primed for war. They moved swiftly through the valley, following the last recorded coordinates of their slain Death Stalkers. The air was thick with the scent of blood, the sand still damp from the recent massacre. Kael'rith knelt beside one of the fallen hunters, inspecting the wound. The cut was clean, surgical, not a single wasted motion. Who fights like this? Then a whisper. The enforcers halted, weapons raised. Vorgith turned sharply. Show yourself. The whisper came again, carried by the wind. A voice, a presence, then movement. From the shadows of the canyon walls, a figure stepped forward, cloaked, hooded, his posture neither aggressive nor defensive. The firelight from the warship's torches illuminated the edges of his face, revealing scars that told stories of forgotten wars. His presence alone sent a ripple to the gathered forces. He was alone, yet, for the first time in their lives, the kings of Zelenar felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not arrogance, uncertainty. Vorgith stepped forward, gripping the hilt of his void cleaver. His voice, deep and unshaken, filled the canyon. You are an anomaly, human. You have defied the Tri-Kingdom for too long. Tell us your name before we erase you from existence. The hermit tilted his head slightly, as if amused. Then he spoke, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The canyon fell into an unnatural silence. The Zelnaar kings, warriors who had conquered worlds, shattered civilizations, and stood unchallenged for centuries, now found themselves frozen, staring at the lone human standing before them. His name had been spoken, and in that instant everything changed. Vorgith the Unyielding, a warlord who had never taken a step back in battle, felt his grip on the void cleaver tremble. His four crimson eyes, always burning with fury, now held something unfamiliar: doubt. Kael'rith the Stormbringer, whose lightning had torn through fleets and reduced planets to smoldering husks, found the crackling energy around his golden armor fading, as if it feared to lash out against the one before him. Xiphos the Shadowborn, the silent schemer who had manipulated empires in the darkness, took an instinctive step back, his obsidian cloak wrapping around him as if trying to hide him from the presence of this man. The Zelnaar enforcers, bred and trained to feel no fear, suddenly found themselves shifting, their grips tightening around their weapons, their breath coming in short gasps. They did not know why, but every instinct in their alien bodies screamed a single truth: they should not be here. The human remained still, watching them with cold, unwavering eyes. His scarred face betrayed no emotion, no malice, no triumph, only patience. Vorgith finally broke the silence. His voice, usually a roar that could shake battlefields, came out quieter than he intended. Impossible. Kael'rith's golden eyes narrowed. You should be dead. The hermit's lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile, more like an acknowledgement. Xiphos' voice was barely above a whisper. How are you still alive? The human took a slow step forward. The enforcers tensed. Even the kings shifted slightly, though none would admit it. You never understood, did you? His voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable weight. You thought I was just another human, another survivor, another name to erase from history. His eyes, sharp as a predator's, locked onto Vorgith. Tell me, King of the Zelnaar, how many times have you sent your warriors to hunt me? Vorgith clenched his jaw, but did not answer. The hermit's gaze swept over them. How many fleets? How many assassins? How many soldiers have died believing they could kill me? Xiphos' voice was tight. Too many. The hermit nodded. And yet here I stand. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken dread. The wind howled through the canyon, yet none of the Zelnaar moved. Then the hermit's voice dropped lower, just above a whisper. Do you finally understand what you've been chasing? Vorgith's fists trembled. He understood. Kael'rith felt his lightning abandon him. He understood. Xiphos, the most cunning of the three, had already known the truth the moment the name was spoken. He had always feared this day would come. The Zelnaar Tri-Kingdom, rulers of 1,000 conquered worlds, had spent years hunting one man, and in doing so, they had forgotten why they feared him in the first place. The hermit took another step forward. This time, the enforcers stepped back. Instinct. Survival. They did not even realize they were doing it. Vorgith's voice, raw with something he refused to name, rang through the canyon. You are not a man. The hermit met his gaze. No. Xiphos exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath for too long. You are a legend. The hermit tilted his head, slightly. Legends fade. But some names never do. A heavy pause. Then he spoke again. Leave this world. Now. And never return. A command, not a request. For the first time in their lives, the kings of Zelnaar found themselves standing at a crossroads they never thought they would face. They could fight, but they would die. Or they could turn, leave this place, and pretend they never came. Vorgith, king of war, who had never turned his back on battle, took a slow, shaking breath. Then he stepped back. Kael'rith followed. Xiphos did not need to be told twice. Without a word, they turned. Their enforcers, confused but obedient, followed. The warship Dread Harbinger rose from the canyon floor, its engines humming with power. Within moments, it ascended into the sky, leaving behind the cursed world of Vorta 7, leaving behind a man they could never kill. The hermit watched them go, his expression unchanged. When the last traces of their presence had vanished, he turned back toward the shadows, his form melting into the darkness of the caverns. Alone, as he had always been, as he would always be. But now, at last, the kings of Zelenar understood. Some names were not meant to be spoken. Some ghosts were never meant to be chased.